Well, in an interesting turn of events, Netflix released the second act of Arcane early, instead of in the evening like they had done for Act 1. I'm excited to dive into more of this series. Let's go! We pick up the story several years after the end of Act 1 or Episode 3. Jace and Victor have been making a lot of advancements for Piltover thanks to the Hextech. Silco is more damaged after the battle with Vander, and most importantly, we see what has become of Powder after she accidentally caused all of that damage at the end of Episode 3. Now, I don't think this is a spoiler, but Powder grows up to take on the name Jinx, which is what her sister Vi called her at the end of Act 1. I love how Jinx is a little like Harley Quinn. She's brilliant, but completely unhinged. I mean, she is the scariest kind of crazy. The imagery the show uses to put us into Jinx's mindset allows us to really see as she does. She's haunted by the past, and the animation uses these small time glitches to show how her mind is fractured. The screen will glitch through her movements and also will show us sketchy hand-drawn outlines of characters, giving us true insight into the horrors that are within her head. Now, despite the craziness that we see within her, there's still a damaged and hurt little girl at the core, which I think makes Jinx very sympathetic, even when she's blowing all kinds of crap up. Now, I wouldn't classify her as a villain, but not a hero either. And I'm not even sure I'd paint her as an anti-hero at this point. I mean, what mainly comes through is that she's a victim. There's this creepy relationship between her and Silco. I mean, he's taken this hurting young girl and manipulated her into his weapon. It's gross and saddening, but also sets up an arc that I think could be explosive. I enjoyed how we're getting a much larger insight into the political workings of the world. There is a ton of internal treachery that takes place as moves and countermoves are executed patiently and subtly. And this area of the story already has some good depth to it, and I think if the show wanted, it could branch off and just show us those dealings, and it'd be wildly interesting as we see how factions scheme and plan to benefit their own desires. Now, I'm also digging the fact that we're learning more about the Hextech, as well as getting some more insight into both Jace and Victor. And while we follow more of Jace's present, we get a good look, at least initially, into Victor's backstory, which of course is shaping his current motivations. The political leanings work their way into this storyline also, but I really want to see the effects of Victor's discovery within the Hextech and what it could mean for him. And it is teased a bit, but I think there's some very exciting and maybe even dangerous story arcs that are on the horizon. If you're a fan of Vi, we do get to see her kick more butt in this, as well as get to enjoy her sarcasm and wit. Now, I'm still surprised at the amount of heart and emotion that the show carries throughout the episodes. Even though we have so much going on in different arenas of the plot, the driving force still remains the bond between Vi and Jinx. It's wildly fractured at this point, but the search and longing that affects each of them is still pretty powerful. And there's a wonderful exchange at the end of this second act that helps to propel us into a climactic situation that should be pretty exciting for the finale. So one thing that I've personally not cared too much about, or really even for, is the Imagine Dragons theme for the show. I mean, it's fine, but it's not something that sucks me in. But there's a point within this where I'm pretty sure we see the band animated as they play their instruments and break into the intro of a song. And it felt a little cheap and even self-serving in a bad way. Now, I'm less annoyed that they used another Imagine Dragons song in the episode than by showcasing the band in an animated form. And speaking of music, there's a point towards the climax of episode 6 where we have a conflict between Vi and Silco. Now, the song was decent, but I don't think that it fit the building intensity and excitement of the scene, so it felt a little bit misplaced. But then that sequence did lead to a moment with Jinx that had a lot of emotional weight, and I loved how powerful the scene became, even if the song choice wasn't as powerful. Now, I'm loving the show so far, but I'm very curious about where they're going to go with only 3 episodes left. I mean, from what I understand, there could be a ton of seasons with this because the lore and the universe are just so expansive. I just don't know if this is going to lead to a massive cliffhanger or if there will be a climax for this storyline that will then open the door for other arcs to be explored. I mean, either way, I am on board because the world is incredibly immersive and the characters are wonderfully crafted. Then you couple that with the exquisite animation style, and we've got something that's hard not to want to continue with. Now, while I held off on giving a score for the first act, I am going to give a preliminary score right now for these 6 episodes. And then next week, I'm going to give you my final rating as a season 1 as a whole. There's sex, no nudity, some profanity, and a ton of violence. I give acts 1 and 2 of Arcane 4.5 out of 5 couches. So what do you think will be in the finale for this? Have you been enjoying the show so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.